Have you ever found yourself wondering how to balance faith, career, and life as a young professional? I get it. As a young adult emerging into the workforce, finding your footing can be rather difficult, especially as a person of faith and if you're working in a secular environment. If that's you, then I'm happy you found today's episode. Welcome to the Always Hope podcast, the show that provides solutions to better life. I'm your host, Dr. Mario Sacasa, and today I welcome Peter Blute, the Executive Director of Young Catholic Professionals. Thank you for joining us in this inspiring conversation where we tackle everything from discerning job transitions and building professional skills to integrating faith into your daily work life. Peter explains the unique role YCP plays in supporting young Catholics by providing them with a community that combines faith, career, and personal development. We also discuss the dynamics of the modern work environment, especially focusing on Gen Z's challenges and opportunities, such as remote work and soft skill development. In this episode, you will discover practical advice and heartfelt wisdom that will help you navigate the complexities of the modern work culture, all while staying true to your Catholic faith, values, and calling. So let's get into this conversation with Peter Blute. Peter Blute, welcome to the Always Hope podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing so well. Great to be here with you, Mario.
Finally, we have persevered, my friend. I mean, the listener needs to know that this process is not as neat and clean as we always want it to be. I mean, this is our third time trying. The first time we had some schedule difficulties. The second time we had some technical difficulties. Even now, as we were getting started here, we had some technical difficulties, but we have pushed through, we have persevered. And I think that this is going to be the greatest podcast episode that I've ever had in my entire life. So let's make it happen.
Let's do it. I mean, your podcast is called Always Hope. So we should have confidence that this is going to be it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We're always hoping and always persevering and always just pushing through with resilience and trying to make sure that we're doing it. So, well, you are the Executive Director of Young Catholic Professionals. Tell the listener, what is that about? What does YCP do? And what do you do in that capacity as the Executive Director?
Yeah, YCP is really a response to this glaring gap that exists right now in the Catholic Church for young people in their 20s and 30s to see their work and the dignity of work through the lens of their faith and to surround themselves with the faith, career, and life connections that they need, the community that they need in order to excel in their work, in order to live an integrated whole life as the person that God has called them to be, and to do it alongside peers and with mentors and spiritual leaders that can guide them through these really crucial stages of their life coming right out of college into early adulthood through hopefully marriage or call to religious vocation. And into that next phase. So it's really an opportunity for people to have a strong group around them that can help them really live the fullness of their life, and to do so at a time when often people are feeling extremely isolated. And so, yeah, we have a chapter model that crosses the country from coast to coast. So we've got 42 chapters, actually, as of tomorrow night, we're launching in Baltimore. And awesome. So we've got chapters across the country that young workers in their 20s and 30s can plug into. They've got a local network, monthly events focused on professional development, spiritual growth, and just building strong friendships is really at the foundation of all that we do. And through that, we learn more, have more confidence in our faith. We understand our career trajectories and the ways we can grow professionally, and ultimately just better understand our place in the world and how we leverage our God-given skills for the most good to get us to heaven, hopefully as saints, and to bring as many people along with us as we can.
Yeah, praise the Lord. Well, how is it different than other not saying singles, but young adult ministries? I know sometimes young adult ministry can feel like a loaded term and people are exhausted by the young adult scene. Sometimes it just feels like it's the same people, or they feel like it's a meat market, or some of these other cliches that get tossed around that are stereotypes that may not all necessarily be fair, but they all exist, at least for some reason,
Sure.
And so how does YCP fit differently or feel differently or exist differently from some of those kind of more traditional young adult ministries?
When you combine three different aspects, it really displays the uniqueness of YCP. I will say before that, though, YCP really seeks to connect back out to all the other opportunities that young adults have in their at the diocesan level, the parish level, or just more broadly in their community. We really seek to do what only YCP can do, and to feed young professionals in a very specific way. So we think about three different areas here. Number one, we have a local network, of course, in our chapters across the country, but they all roll up into one broader community. So you think about our national conference that we do in the spring every year, 800 plus people from across the country that all converge on Dallas for this inspiring weekend. We have digital events that bring people together, like a monthly podcast and other opportunities that people can connect with their peers from across the country through online forums. You think about people that are traveling for work or dropping into a new city for a job. They have that local network they can start with immediately. We can be the first place that they come, and then connect them out more broadly into their community. So that's the first area, local and national. The second area is that we bridge the generations. While our primary focus is on young workers in their 20s and 30s, we also have what is arguably the largest growing network of Catholic executives, Catholic leaders that are deeply passionate and committed to their Catholic faith and eager to pour into the next generation and guide them along that road. So bringing that peer network, but also knowing there's more experienced leaders that are accessible for our members to learn from. So that bridging generations is really key. And then thirdly, this combination of faith and work, right? And so, yes, you're getting this spiritual formation through the interactions with your peers, through our speaker series, our panel discussions on virtue, our conference highlighting beautiful saints and how they worked in the world, but also sought this kind of excellence in their lives, and all the other types of programming and content and experiences through YCP. But really, at the end of the day, it's about how does this community that I'm surrounding myself with help me be a better employee, a better worker, a better co-worker to the people that are, maybe in the cubicles next to me, be a better part of a team at work. And how is my faith really the primary or maybe even the only lens that I see all of that through? So my faith animates my work, gives purpose to my work. So that combination of faith and work, the generational bridge that we provide, and that local and national network, those three together, we really haven't seen anything else that's at the national level that's addressing the needs of young people like YCP is.
I think it's hitting, as you said, the three things that most young people are struggling with. I mean, young adults, you graduate college. Let's say you had a conversion in high school and you're part of a vibrant high school ministry. Or let's say you did have a conversion in college and you're part of a very vibrant college ministry. Even if you have a conversion later, and you can get plugged in still. But particularly like with campus ministries, I know for my experience, that was me. I had my conversion in college, was part of a very vibrant campus ministry at Florida State University. Very grateful for the Brotherhood of Hope, who at the time were running the campus ministry that I'm deeply indebted to.
I just met them.
Did you really?
Yeah,
okay.
They seem to be doing amazing work. Yeah.
Yeah. Which conference did you meet them at?
At the Napa Faith and Business Conference in New York.
Oh, wonderful. Week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Good guys. Absolutely. So very, very grateful to them. But I know like when I graduated, even though I got married right after I graduated, moving into a new city, starting grad school, you feel like you're alone and you can get plugged into a parish. And sometimes at parishes, and I say this respectfully, the church is skewing demographically a little bit older. You go to a men's ministry, or you go just to go into mass, and you have a hard time finding other young people, young couples, young individuals who are around and active in their faith as well. Or you feel that you're working in an environment that's secular in nature, and you feel like you're the only Catholic that's there, or the only Christian that's there. And you try to kind of, depending on the organization, make it known or not known to whatever degree the organization is tolerant to it or not. And so you feel like you're maybe like a little bit of a spy playing a game and trying to go to whatever events that the your business has, and you're trying to let people know maybe you are or aren't Catholic or whatever, but you can feel very isolated in that space. Both then you're hanging out with young folks who don't share your faith, or you go to church and you don't feel like you're seeing young people, but you have a shared connection with faith. That I think this is where something like YCP can really kind of bridge the gap, because it helps people to be able to see that you can pursue holiness in career and family. Those things are not contra to one another. There is a way to be able to find balance as you're pursuing excellence in your career and excellence in your life as well. And that's what I see YCP as being able to offer, particularly those young people who feel like, man, they're not finding anybody to connect with.
Yeah, you're right on. And we talk about kind of 5 core relationships that are especially crucial in your 20s. You think about a great boss, or for some, called to build something on their own, maybe a great partner or co-founder. You talk about finding a spouse. You think about mentors. That's number 3. You think about friendships, which is really where it all begins. And then spiritual guides, right? Whether it's actual religious, or maybe it's friendships that have a deep faith, and there's obviously some combination there that supports you in your spiritual growth. And the reality is that some of these relationships will be, we've seen, thrust on you if you aren't intentional about seeking them out yourself. And so I love this image of students coming out of college, and there's going to be one or more hands extended reaching out to help them up to the next level, right, to the next stage of life, to the next just step for them. There's a lot of those hands that are going to be extended to them, right? There's going to be the hand of the maybe the larger corporation and the culture of that company, or the boss, or the coworkers that they surround themselves with. There are just so many different hands kind of vying for access to eyeballs and ears of young people, right?
Right.
If you're not intentional about it, then it will be thrust upon you. And the way the world is going now, there's a good chance you're going to be surrounded with people that are all probably trying to figure out life, but are doing it in very different ways. And just generally that kind of secular culture will start to seep into your life, and could start to kind of bifurcate your spiritual life, if you're strong in it even, and the rest of your life, your personal, your work life. So I like to think of YCP as a strong hand extended out to help you be a whole person in this next stage, because we're talking about your faith life, your professional life, and your personal life, integrating those and surrounding you with the right people so that you can pursue that path of sainthood. And so to do that, we don't want to be an aggressive hand, right? But we want to be a confident hand that can be extended and say, there is another way. And you're still going to be in the world. I mean, most of our members are not working in ministries or the church proper. Right. They're out there in the world, surrounded by people that likely don't believe or agree with a lot of what we believe as Catholics. But when you come to YCP, you have a confidence that it instills with you over time, because you can say, yeah, I'm going to these events, I'm building these friendships with people that are having similar experiences. We can talk about those, and we can all agree to pray for one another, to support for one another, to be a phone call away if you get in a situation with some kind of wokeness that you end up finding in the workplace. But really, it gives people this sense of hope and this confidence, this surety that they can live their faith in the world in appropriate ways. Know it first, that interior life developing first. And then from there, the kind of boldness that people tell us they have because they come to YCP to share, to take advantage of opportunities to share that faith, maybe even just in small but beautiful ways, with the people they're interacting with out in the world.
Yeah, that hashtag adulting, I think, is what you're speaking about here. This sense that we do have these transition points in life, and when we graduate and we're in our 20s and 30s and we're trying to get our career off the ground, as you indicated, we need some key relationships. And you beautifully said, I forget the 5 of them, but knowing that you need support from others. You're not going to be a lone ranger just getting out there and blazing your own trail. I mean, you may, if you're, even as an entrepreneurial, starting your own business, you're going to need financial support. You're going to need investors. You're going to have to be able to navigate those relationships so that you're getting the right people on your team. And I think what you're saying is, don't be not to say don't be suspicious, but be wise and shrewd about who you're bringing into your team. Being open in the sense that you're going to want to communicate, you're going to want to navigate differences, you're going to want to surround yourself with people who are going to have the best interests for you. And what you're proposing is that YCP and its mentor model and the relationships that it can offer both at the local and at the national level should be something that you could put in your tool belt just to be able to help navigate those things a little bit more.
Yeah, something is so life-giving. That's what our members tell us, is that it helps them. I mean, I think of one of our members, Juan, who told us he had a great Catholic community in college. He stepped out the doors at graduation. He got dropped into a large corporate environment. And he went into this repeat circle of go to work really hard, go home, kind of exhausted, go to sleep, wake up the next day, rinse and repeat. And he said he really felt this deep sense of growing depression and disconnectedness and lack of direction. And coming to YCP, he said, gave him the relationships that ultimately led back to this joy in his life. I mean, he described it as coming back to this joy in my life. And that's what community does when we're surrounded by people that are eager to get to know us, grow with us. And also, we talk about challenging one another at YCP. There's that, fraternal correction is a little more of the structure that the church gives us for that. But really, this is about growing alongside one another and seeking the good in that person and knowing that together we can go a lot farther, especially at such a crucial point.
Right. That's right. Well, I think that as society has shifted over the last 50 plus years, at this point, 6 years, wherever we're at now, what has happened is that we've made family life and marriage optional. They're add-ons, they're add extras, they're nice. But what we've really done is we've made work and career in that the financial independence that comes from that as the non-negotiable. Like that's the thing that needs to happen in life. And if you can get that squared away, then everything else will be taken care of. And Derek Thompson coined this phrase called workism, not wokeism, workism, where he's talking about just this idea that almost work has become its own religion, that we have elevated work beyond just what it meant to do, which is to bring provision into family and to be able to have finances to be able to do other things like take care of your family primarily. But now we look at work as the place where meaning comes from. It's the place where community comes from. It's the place where investment of all my time and energy comes from. Everything, work has to be the place where I get all of my fulfillment in life. And what we're realizing in a secular culture is that work, like any other idol, can't hold it, can't be the thing that has the greatest meaning for you. It's not going to be. Even if you work in the church, I would say, even if you work in the church, that line gets a little bit blurred at times because you're working in ministry and you think that I'm serving the Lord. But even then, you have to be able to have appropriate boundaries and separate your work from your relationship with God. We could talk about what that can look like for people who work in a ministry context. But even in a corporate environment, in a secular context, if you're in the waters and you're just swimming along and doing, like you said, people are going to be reaching out their hands and they're going to be encouraging unknowingly because they probably don't even have a proper understanding of what it means for themselves. Just this is the company culture. This is just the way things are. And if you're not aware of that within yourself and you're not looking to see other ways to be able to manage work in prayer, work in family life, so that you're not just being swept up and being overtaken by work, especially if you're successful, and especially if you're very capable. Your company's going to see value in you, and they're going to want to milk you for what you got. I'm not trying to be negative in that space, but just encouraging people to have their eyes open. Like go into a company working and have your eyes open in terms of what the culture is. Not to be afraid. Of course, you're not going to work in a place that's going to share 100% your values, but be grateful for the job that you have, but also being able to draw healthy boundaries within yourself so you're not completely getting lost within this workism environment that seems to happen?
Yeah, we over the years we've kind of looked at the types of people that come to YCP, the challenges they encounter, and how we can best support them. And it is
Hmm.
kind of interesting to think about a bit of a framework there, because people listening to this may be thinking they fall into one of these buckets without realizing it. But you think of there are some people in uh, maybe really large or really progressive companies, where they just may really get beaten down. Like they may in fact not be able to live their full self in appropriate ways at work, right? And so there's
Right.
a question to ask there, like through prayer. I think that's important through discernment. Is this where you're calling me, Lord? Am I
Hmm.
really meant to be here on the front lines? Help me have perseverance, help me with the kind of resilience and the strong relationships and guidance I need, faith-filled guidance that I need to be in this really challenging environment. Some people are called to
Hmm.
that. Some people
Yep.
also may be called to go elsewhere. And so part of what YCP is working to develop is how do we have a growing uh, database of values aligned secular companies that we can guide our
Wow.
members to. So that's we have many of those companies in our network already, but how can we have more of a platform and a focus on a talent ecosystem for our members?
Mm.
Because some people will be called to go work in a different environment. And then, of course, this third bucket, some are called to um, go into, start their own firm or buy a firm and grow it and change the culture in that company for the better for your employees, or perhaps to go into more kind of institutional ministry work as well, which is
Hmm.
a small subset, but still crucial work. So just being intentional, I think, is really key with who are you surrounding yourself with? What is the environment that you're in your workplace, in your friend groups? And then at the foundation of it all has to be this growing prayer life and relationship with our Lord, and just saying, Lord, where are you calling us to? This actually brings this quick story here, because this really
Yeah.
shifted for me the way I think about um, including God in my workday more through prayer. One of the Sisters of Life, beautiful order up in New York, one of them spoke at
Hmm.
our conference a number of years ago, and she was actually an attorney before she had the call to religious life. And she tells this story of the end of a long workday. And she's about to pack up and leave. It's already late, far beyond the normal 5 o'clock ending time for some, and her boss comes in and basically stack of papers on the desk. I need this brief by tomorrow morning, right? And she knew as soon as he gave it to her, like, this is one of those all night things, right? You're called to do at the
Right.
early stage of your career. And she just felt overwhelmed, and he leaves the room and she steps back, and I love her response. She said, Lord, what are we going to do about this? And I think about that often, because if
Hmm.
you are developing a relationship with your maker, right, it is a we, right? He's here beside us. He's working alongside us. He actually has given us this faculty of co-creating with him. He didn't have to. He could have created it all for us and told us how to do it all. But instead, he gives us this opportunity, this even power, right, when used correctly, to co-create with him in the world. So I love this image of, Lord, what are we going to do in our discernment? Whether it's, do I stay at this job? Do I stay on this team? Am I called to this relationship? This person that I could spend the rest of my life with through marriage? Am I called to religious life? Or where am I called to serve in my community? How am I called to serve my friends, the people that I'm surrounding myself with? So I just offer that as maybe a framework or a way to think a
Yeah.
response in those difficult situations.
Yeah. To bring it to prayer, and I love that you're already speaking so much about that. That prayer is what guides our work, and the church has a beautiful tradition where it speaks about specifically a book like "The Soul of the Apostolate." If you read that, where it speaks about the contemplative life comes first, and then the active life comes after. Or thinking also about in the Benedictine tradition, or at Labora, that the prayer being able to find prayer within our day-to-day experience is then where the bucket that then work flows out of. That it shouldn't be these two poles again that are set against one another, but rather that we allow prayer to then infuse us and to guide us throughout the totality of our day, regardless of whether we're in a secular setting or in a religious setting. That we're the ones who have the capacity, by virtue of our baptism, to bring grace into whatever circumstance that we're in. And that really is the call of the laity. It's detailed in the Second Vatican Council, is to get out, to be into the world, to feed the conscience of all the various marketplaces and domains, whether it's medicine or academic institutions or technology sector or entertainment or law. You pick whatever sector of the economy. The church rightly says we want to make sure that we have people of good faith and goodwill in every single one of these domains. Politics, pick one, so that there are people there who are helping to form the conscience of those respective domains in situations. And so, as you're saying, it's like, it's not something that you can just go and blaze and go do on your own. Rather, we have to make sure that we're measured and that we have this relationship with God built within us to help us to be able to start getting some discernment on things. Because then when you get into a difficult situation where you're being asked to participate in a training for some inclusion seminar that may go against your values, well, how do you respond to that? And it's wisdom that's going to guide you to know whether or not you should say something in that moment, or whether or not you need to just keep your mouth shut, and or if it's becoming too much of a press, if it's becoming imposed on you too much, whether or not you should continue with this position or this work, or whether you should be looking for something else. But I love how you are just encouraging prayer to be the anchor that helps guide the conversations and the discernment as you're navigating the complexities of the work environment that you may be in.
Yeah, it really is where you have to start. We've had hundreds, probably even thousands of Catholic leaders come and speak at our events. And one of the things that I hear most often is the challenge to spend more time in prayer than feels comfortable. Especially, you think about how these professionally successful Catholic leaders structure their days. Almost all of them universally are going to get their prayer in before work starts. They're going to get their exercise in before work starts. Yep. It's challenging. Yep. I'm not really that good at it.
I try. That's what I do, and I would strongly recommend everybody. I mean, I get up early, I say my prayers, and then I get my workout, and then I get started with work.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's really the one time a day that we still can really have control of what's happening. And so, right. If that's the case, then the follow-on that they share usually, if that is true, which my own experience has shown that to be true, that also spending a bit more time than feels comfortable is also true and leads to bearing great fruit in your day. So thinking about, I pass a church on my way to work, and there are days when I have the space in the morning and I can stop in there and have some time for adoration. And then there are days when I'm like, man, I could go in there for 5 minutes if I'm like in and out. And then I stop and I'm like, well, I could probably do 10 minutes. Like, let's just double it and see what happens, and just that calming, that centering before I go into work and the kind of deluge of the day hits you.
Well, on the website, you have a quote that says, prayer feeds work, then work becomes prayer. Or when prayer feeds work, then work can become prayer. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the integration of prayer and work. When you're just working and then you kind of do your prayer separately, it's not integrated in the work that you do. It can still be good. But really, the full integration of the two is a life lived in connection with Jesus and in relationship with Him. And so, what that looks like, I think, is elevating that from I work over here, I pray over here, to what are these small moments when I am doing work, but there's an awareness of Christ being present with me. I think that's how it starts. It's just this awareness. It's just a momentary blip. That's where it starts, where it's like, okay, I'm about to send this email. I'm going to just say, come, Holy Spirit, or I'm going to say a quick prayer for this person, right? Maybe they're struggling with something today I don't know about. Takes 10 seconds, and then you push send. It's an awareness, right? That's when you start to see, I'm working on this spreadsheet, this is kind of monotonous, right? Maybe it's something that I don't love doing. That awareness.
Sanctifying
Yeah,
work.
it's that
That's what
moment
that
to
is.
stop and say, but Lord, you must be calling me to do this, right?
Right.
And so help me to do this work well. And there's a kind of freedom that comes from that, a peace, a joy that can come from that. So that's where work is elevated by that integration of prayer. And so when work becomes a prayer, when you can start to say, I have these moments, these habits, I would actually call them habits, because you have to form the habit of going to Christ in your work and through your work. You can do it before you step into a meeting. That's another common practice we talk about at YCP. You're about to jump on Zoom. Take 5 seconds and say, come, Holy Spirit, be a part of this conversation. If appropriate, you could also pray at the beginning of your meeting, but a lot of people may not be in an environment where they can do that. So there's these habits that we can build that really make it a lot easier. But these baby steps, you're not going to start transforming your day and go from 0 to 100 on day one.
That's right. Yeah, take it baby steps. Find the ways that you can incorporate prayer a little bit more into your life, into your day. Finding little ways that you can bring grace into the work that you're doing. You're going to be able to elevate it and hopefully be able to have a little better sense about it. If you're enjoying this conversation and wondering how as a young adult can I grow not just in my professional development, but in my relationship skills, then I want to encourage you to check out Dating Well, my online course that walks you by the hand and guides you through all the steps of the modern dating scene. Helps you to be able to understand what it means to date casually, what it means to move forward into a committed relationship, and how to discern that relationship well. What are yellow flags? What are green flags? What are red flags? What are things that are going well? How to be able to determine whether or not the relationship is progressing towards something that actually is sustainable. So if this is of any interest to you, then please head on over to drmariosacasa.com. Check out my course, Dating Well. It's going to help you understand what's going on within the modern dating scene and how to be able to grow in healthy affection for the person that you're with, or set you up for success for whatever the next relationship will be. Now, you had mentioned earlier that part of what YCP is also trying to do is to help people, maybe even with this question of discernment regarding when to move a position or when not to. Maybe that's just a topic of conversation maybe you've had, but here's my thought. My thought is that we live we live in a society now where very rarely does somebody start at a company when they're 18 and stay at that company until they retire. That is not the norm anymore. I know folks have some family members who have been in companies for 20 years, a long time, which is great. That's not been my experience. I've bounced around and worked at a lot of different places over the years. And I think that's become more common, or at least more normal, where people are moving around. You can go kind of either way with this question. So I'd love to just get your insight as to how do we help a young person discern whether or not it's time to move on? You graduate, you're working in your job for the first 5 years of your career. It's going good. All of a sudden, some hardship starts to kind of come up. Maybe it's company culture. Maybe it is the political ideations that we've been speaking about. But maybe it's even more acute where it's just the team or the boss, and there seems to be an unfairness or pressure that's being placed on you. Or maybe it's even the role that you're in isn't quite as much of a match as you wanted it to be. And so you're beginning to feel the dredges of burnout are starting to emerge, and you're beginning to ask questions about, is this really where I'm supposed to be, Lord? How do we help somebody, or what advice would you give to somebody that maybe finds themselves at that position and they're trying to figure out, should I just carry my cross as the Lord tells me to do and suck it up and offer this to the Lord and grind this out? Is this what I'm supposed to do? Which there's virtue in that, and I don't say that pejoratively. Or am I called to really start opening up, Lord, and looking for other opportunities? And is that what you're telling me to do in the midst of this frustration, is to begin putting feelers out or having conversations or getting Indeed up and running or getting my LinkedIn profile ready to go. So I'm starting to present myself or to be open for whatever new opportunities could emerge. What advice would you give to somebody who finds themselves in that space where they're trying to discern, should I stay or should I go?
Yeah, that's a very, very common and also really important question. A couple of things come to mind. Firstly, there's a great book called The Defining Decade, written by a psychologist. Highly recommended. The defining decade
Okay.
being your 20s.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
not
yeah.
not from the book's not written from a Catholic lens or anything, but
Sure.
the psychologist in there talks about this identity capital, this gathering of experiences that we have in our 20s that impact the rest of our life more so than gathering of experiences in our 30s, 40s, etc., or even our teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
Because our 20s are this time of, for most of us, the first true complete independence that we have. Independence in decision making, autonomy, also for most of us, providing for ourselves, and being in the world without the kind of guidance and structures that we've had up to that point through the end of college. So I think this idea of identity capital is interesting because it could then give you a lens to think through the experience that you're having now. And what I mean by that is, in this trial that, this struggle that you're grappling with in, the early stage of your career, maybe at this workplace, or maybe it's kind of a feeling that I'm not being stretched or growing in this position. There's different,
Right. Different angles to that.
Yeah. But thinking about this as, is this something where I'm still growing and learning? Now, that could be I'm growing in skill sets. It could be I'm growing, so more of the hard skills, let's say. Even if it's tough, I can still be building a valuable skill set. Also, it could be the soft skills, right? Maybe I'm learning how to navigate these different workplace situations. I'm learning how to navigate people skills, people dynamics, right? There's so much value in that. Maybe even beyond the hard skills development. In these situations that we find ourselves in early in our careers, we can start to ask ourselves, am I growing? Am I learning? And if I am, then you're kind of taking that to prayer and saying, Lord, this is hard. I don't like this, or I'm frustrated by this. I wish this wasn't happening. But I am learning here. And this is where a mentor can really be valuable as well. Someone who's more experienced, and you can say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing in this current stage in my life. Is this something that I need to address, or is it an opportunity to grow in virtue? Also, a spiritual director is a great support as well in these situations, especially from the perspective of your spiritual life and your development as a virtuous person on the path to sainthood. So all of this is to say that if you're not growing any longer, I think that tension becomes more acute. And if you're not growing any longer, then I think the question becomes, can I change my situation at this company or in this role? Can I go ask for more work from my boss? Could I take on a special project? Could I ask for an internal transfer to another team where I have a lot of interest in developing this skill set, or I think it'll be a better fit for what I bring to the table professionally? I think you can start to ask yourself some of these questions, get input from the people around you, and that can guide you in that discernment. Those are some initial thoughts, but I as a manager, someone who hires people now, it is interesting because people do jump around more, and that can be tough, right? Because we're a small team, and you bring people up and you get them all situated, and then they're called to something else. We do our best to support them in that. I want them to be successful. From an employee perspective, I also get that you want to gather those pieces of identity capital. I think at the end of the day, my encouragement would be, do the best work you can where you are planted today.
Sure. Sure.
Don't always be looking
Yeah.
for the next thing. Do good work on the team you're on. You're there until you're not there anymore, right?
Yeah. 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 Bloom where you're planted,
Yeah,
as it says, you know. And so do the best that you can. And I appreciate the perspective you're offering, which is that, okay, so you feel a little friction. Okay. One, that's normal, recognizing that we all are going to have friction in whatever work environment that we're in. So you ask yourself the question, which is what you said, is, am I still growing here? Is this still helping me? Am I still effective in the work that I'm doing as well? And if not, then you start by asking, well, is there a different position within the environment that within the corporation that I'm in? And if you're in a large enough corporation, then you have a lot of different places you can pivot into, which is the gift of large corporations, where you're not leaving the job, but you're maybe going to a different team or different sector, a different part of it. And I know some companies encourage that more than others. Something like Facebook, I've heard, is very generous in the sense of like, if this isn't working for you, let's try other places, even if it isn't necessarily what you're hired for. So some flexibility within that. But if you find that still, like, it's still not just at all what's fitting, then you start asking the other questions and you start entertaining other options. And I love that you said, certainly, like, let's give where you're at the first go. Like, let's try your best to make the situation that you're in work before you start looking for other opportunities. The second piece that I would add to that is that if you are a young person who's in this place and you're kind of discerning this, you can only discern reality, which is to say you can only discern prospects that are real, that are given. If you have another job opportunities that are coming to you, that's something that you can discern, and you start looking and saying, well, how does this job compare to this one? And how does this position compare to this one? You can't discern things that haven't materialized yet. Because then you're just chasing fantasy. It's also worth for you to say, if this is the first time you're doing it, great. All right. Keep growing, keep learning about your process. But if it becomes a pattern, it's also worth asking, like, well, am I not resilient enough? Am I not gritty enough? Am I not doing the work interiorly to navigate complex relationships in difficult environments as well? Because there's something in that too that we need to kind of be paying attention to. So I guess the long story short, or the long story long, of this whole thing is that if you find yourself in this place where you are kind of discerning, do the work of discerning, and then do the work also of learning about yourself in this process. Now, if we could just shift gears here for a second, also, I know Gen Z gets a bad rap, and so we were just talking about maybe just how easy it is for them to kind of move from job to job, and it's a real culture shift. And in other places as well, Gen Z kind of gets a bad rap when it comes to maybe lacking social skills, and they haven't had the friction maybe that previous generations have had in work environments, and so maybe they just don't have a concept for it. Maybe they're expecting too much, or I don't know. As a manager, as somebody now who's overseeing YCP and working with young people, are you seeing a difference in this kind of emergent cohort? Or what differences do you see in this emergent kind of workforce that didn't exist maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, well, a couple interesting dynamics come to mind. Firstly, from surveying our audience, we know that as much as 30% of our member base is still living at home with their parents, or has moved back home with their parents.
Or has moved back. Okay. After graduation.
After graduation. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay.
I mean, that's a big dynamic.
That's a large. That's like a third. That's like a third of your member base.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of implications here. Your independence, autonomy, growth, depending on family dynamics and, what it's like. Also, just your interactions with friends. You don't have roommates that you're living with. It's just going to be different living life when you're at home. Even if you go out and have a strong social life, it's just going to be different, right? Because there's the family dynamics, the family of origin dynamics that are that we all know exist, right? And play a major part on how we live our life, right?
I'm a therapist, remember?
Yeah,
so
exactly. It's tough to escape that without a lot of intentionality while you're living at home, still as an adult now, with the kind of autonomy that adulthood calls for. So I think that's something that's just a big dynamic shift, right? And I think the other one is that there is an increasing number of people that have not worked in person in a work environment. And so,
Hmm.
I've met a number of these people who are 3, 4, even 5 years into their career, and they've never been in an office setting. The
So
prevalence of
total work
remote
from
work.
home their entire time, all remote
Yeah.
work.
So they went
Yeah,
from a
wow.
strong, in-person community and environment of learning in college. Um,
Hmm.
and then they went out into work and they've been behind a computer. And, I've as I've been kind of gathering feedback and commentary on this, I think that the biggest concern, especially when you look at the baby boomer generation, they are
Hmm.
extremely concerned about the long term ability for these people to the Gen Z to interact with interpersonal relationships. Like, what is that going to look like for them at these extremely formative years when they're not having the informal brushing up against people, overhearing conversations, being randomly thrust into certain environments where they have to think and act and take in new information quickly and make decisions and
Mm.
all of the types of things that naturally happen in a work environment when I walk down the hall and I bump into my coworkers, or my manager
Right.
pops into my office quickly and wants to share something or ask for something. Or yeah, I mean, there's all these. There's the physiological response,
Yeah,
there's a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
psychological
yeah.
response, there's the just the interpersonal response. So if they haven't been in these environments, I mean, we're just seeing that there's a lot of those basic um, kind of truisms that historically have been understood in how you interact with people that are missing and have to actually be trained now. What's appropriate?
What can you give a concrete example of
Yeah,
that? Like, what
I
would
was
that look like?
actually I was talking to someone recently, and he was the CEO of a publicly traded company with 10,000
Hmm.
employees, and he said
Wow.
they had a new analyst come on, and really young guy, early 20s, right out of school, and the guy, there was some onboarding with him as the CEO, and this kind of development mentorship opportunity, and this young guy started calling him by his last name, like they were college buddies. Uh,
Oh, are you
yeah,
kidding?
and
Oh, oh,
he
okay,
just didn't
okay.
know that,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that's not appropriate. Like there may be a certain
Right,
work environment or culture on a team, maybe. I mean, there's
right.
certainly opportunities where that may be appropriate, but certainly in the age
Not your CEO.
experience gap, and I mean, this is the leader of the organization, and you just joined the team. And there had to be a moment where he actually explained this to this guy and said, "Hey, you know, I would love for us to develop some camaraderie, right? But there's just
Right,
it shows a level of disrespect, and I know you don't mean it that way, but that's just not appropriate for the workplace, right?"
right.
I think that's a pretty new thing that we're having to correct. That's a small
Hmm.
example, but is that type of thing where just the interactions, I think oversharing sometimes,
Oversharing, over
over
familiarity, maybe
familiarity.
too quick.
Yep.
Yeah, just being overly casual as
Yeah.
well. But again, that's the culture, isn't it? I mean, like I'm wearing a tie. I have my coat on right now in this interview. I have my tie on, certainly because of the conversation, but actually because I have counseling sessions after this, and I wear a tie every time I'm in a counseling session. I'm charging a fee. I want to display a sense of professionalism
Yep.
to my to my clients, certainly that I'm here. I mean, business. We're going to get work done. This is what we're going to do, and this thing, kind of demonstrates that. But as a society, again, as we've moved away from standards, we've fallen just across the board into just casualness and familiarity and viewing that as the new normal. And so this young kid is just growing up in that and being raised in that. I mean, how many people even, I mean, now I'm just going to get on my soapbox. I must sound like an old person, but like, even like when my kids' friends come over, I want to be Mr. Sakasa or at bare minimum, Mr. Mario. I'm fine with Mr. Mario. Like, that's okay. But don't call me by my first name because like there has to at least be some level of
Yeah.
respect. And similar with my kids, I want to make sure that they're not calling their teachers by their first name. They're not calling their parents' friends by their first name, but that is something that is there. Now, what are other ways, I guess, that over familiarity, oversharing, or maybe even the remote working? I mean, you talk about man, this is a generation now that had to go through the pandemic and had high school disrupted or college disrupted, and everything went online. And we're still doing a lot more online than we used to pre-pandemic. And the challenge with online stuff, whether it's, well, I mean, right now we're having a synchronous conversation because we're both chatting, but with text messaging, young people think that, oh, we're just kind of rattling off messages and going back and forth. But anytime that you text somebody, it's always, there's a filter. You're thinking through, what emoji am I going to send? What proper phrasing am I going to use? What shorthand am I going to use? There's a lot of thought that goes into what you're actually putting into the text, which may not necessarily be there when you're just having kind of live conversations. So that's one place where I see that, particularly when it comes to dating and relationships, that they're lacking the social skills of being able to engage with somebody in person, in vivo. They can craft witty texts or have memes ready to go for Snapchat, but translating that into actual personal engagement seems to be a little bit of a gap that's there. And I'm not saying that's everybody, but we're just seeing trends be a little bit higher with this group. Is that something else? Is that what you're speaking about, or what would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly prevalent. I think both there's kind of two parts to this. Call it the Twitter culture of 130 characters or whatever, right? I mean, it's the ability that I can kind of hide behind that because I can craft the exact message I want to respond with, versus even a live phone call where I don't get that chance to step back and pick every word that I want to use. At the same time, the other aspect of this kind of texting culture is that oftentimes I'm firing off a message because it's a short response. And that may be okay most of the time with friends, but when it gets into work relationships or you start working with clients, right? And there's a lot of texting now. I mean, I'm a big part of my role is working with our supporters, of fundraising, right? And these are people that have been extremely generous with us, or we hope will grow to become supporters of this in various ways. But a lot of these people use text too. So it's not even just Gen Z, but there still needs to be a decorum. There needs to be an ability to think through a response, knowing that we don't have all the other body language and tone of voice and other indications to receive with that as context, with that message. And then the other thing that I see is a missed opportunity to pick up the phone, call people, and make things happen. There's a kind of tenacity that comes from not hiding behind email and texting. It's easy to send an email out and say, hey, I'd love to meet with you to talk about XYZ, and here's the ask, and it's organized, and here's the dates. And I mean, all of our inboxes are overrun now, right? There's a lot of noise. But that ability to just, it takes so much confidence and experience, and I'm just not seeing that from young people. Even if they do it in a haphazard way, even if they aren't great at it, but just picking up the phone and just being like, hey, can we get together, right? Or even a teammate, like, hey, I've got this question, like, we could have just done all this async on Slack, but really let's just pound this out in 5 minutes and be done with it, rather than going back and forth for 20 minutes trying to communicate over text. So anyway.
My mind went immediately to Moneyball. Have you ever seen that movie with Brad Pitt? And when he's trying to fire sale his players, he's calling managers, hey, Susie, get this person on the line. He's like calling, all right, here's the offer. Get back to me. Bam. Next person, like that. that doesn't happen.
There's something
anymore.
to that, I think. I see that as a helpful skill in certain environments. It's just necessary to make things happen. So, I think there's a lot more coaching, guidance, encouragement that we're having to invest in young people today to cultivate that. Someone said something to me recently that blew my mind. That Gen Z will have spent more time on a phone than a full QWERTY computer keyboard.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they're actually we're getting to a point there's actually some computer skills that are going to have to be taught because they've done everything on mobile apps. their whole
Yeah,
life.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah. So
it's
we're yeah,
crazy
oh
to
yeah,
think about.
it's crazy. Well, listen, I'm somebody who my entire world is remote. I mean, I do all my podcasts remote. I do all my sessions remote. I do everything on my computer, and I have to admit that sometimes when I have to write my name or actually handwrite something, like my hand cramps up. It's like my hand, like my the muscles, the micro muscles in my fingers have forgotten how to write. Now, I didn't have good handwriting to begin with. Okay, so it's just making this whole process even worse. But even when I'm writing a check, which I know young people don't know what that is, but when you write a check, it's like I don't even am I doing this right? Am I remembering? Because even I'm forgetting some of these basic skills. So I get it, but we have to. It is interesting to say that companies have to then invest in their young people to help them socially get up to speed, and even seminaries are doing this now. We talk about something like the propedeutic year, which is really meant to be a year of spiritual and human formation. And what the church is saying as a whole is that we need this first year before we even get into education, philosophical or theological formal academic study. We need to give a year for this young man to just disconnect from the world, learn basic primers of prayer, and be able to start doing some of the things that we're speaking about here, some basic human formation helping, because we got to be able to teach people how to be able to interact, because it's just a skill that is completely lost.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about bringing this back to
Yeah, yeah,
your young adult audience. Like, what do you do in response to this, right? Well, I think
right.
firstly there's an awareness that or a tendency, an awareness of the tendency to hide behind digital forms of communication, right? And I can also say though that it differentiates people. If I put my hiring manager hat on, it
Mm,
differentiates people that pick up the phone and make a phone call. Uh,
that's fascinating.
so I think
Yeah.
keeping in mind that writing a handwritten note,
What does that make you think? All right, so let's get real practical. Somebody makes a phone call as opposed to writing the note. Like, yeah, as a hiring manager, what goes into your mind in terms of the qualities that person possesses?
that this person has a confidence, an ability to communicate. They've got a tenacity. They've got a real desire. Let's say it's in an environment where we're hiring, interviewing someone. I'm trying to think now of all the people that I've hired. How many did a follow up phone call and even just left me a voicemail or a handwritten
Mm-hmm.
note? Almost none of them. And we've hired some amazing people. Like we have an unbelievable team.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so it's not the only indicator, but when you start to think about being part of a pool of hiring that's pretty broad, sometimes you're not going to have the phone number. I get that. But those things differentiate you in a digital first world. Yeah, it makes me think that um, this person is strong enough in their interpersonal skills that they see the power of um, real interaction and
mm-hmm.
that they're comfortable with that. And it doesn't have to be perfectly executed, right? But the fact that they were intentional about it shows me that they probably have a higher desire to be a part of this team. That I can probably have a higher amount of confidence in them interacting with other stakeholders through their role here, and also just that there's an openness to kind of um, it's so hard to get to know people from behind a camera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
certainly over text or email to grow a
Right,
relationship. But
right.
there's just
Yeah,
this sense
yeah.
that they'll probably fit better in our culture here at YCP because we want to have that in-person first experience. 3/4 of my team is remote, so I'm not saying we're always in person,
Mm-hmm.
but there's that drive, that understanding that there's more value in being together, more value in picking up the phone and having a live voice, more ability to communicate sensitive information when you've got tone of voice, body language, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
there's these little pieces of soft skills um, that I've seen be tremendously valuable in the work we do, and I don't think it's unique to
Yeah,
YCP and the fact that we're
I don't think
agnostic
so. No, I
and
think it's everywhere. I
transcends.
think it's
Yeah.
everywhere. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So this episode, we've done a wonderful job just getting real practical for the young adults listening in terms of how do you really make this transition to from college into work and then from beginning your career. Recapping here, all right, it's just got to have prayer. You got to have your prayer life sorted out. That's something I tell all my supervisees when I'm working with particularly Christian or Catholic therapists. It's like, if you're going to be doing this type of work, specifically the work of therapy, you got to get your prayer life figured out so that you can be able to genuinely listen to the Lord and get his wisdom as he's guiding you. And we talked about surrounding yourself with good community. That means having good mentors, it means having good friends, it means having good bosses, people who are genuinely seeking your best interest, people who want to help support you, people who want to help you find success in their career, in your career. But then we also offer some clear advice about if you're in a tough situation, how to be able to discern kind of moving out or whether or not you should stay. And then even here, as we've been speaking for the last few minutes about, let's talk about, soft skills that are lacking and how to be able to help young people that. Is there anything that we're missing when you think of this kind of emergent workforce that needs to be considered that we can offer some practical advice to be able to help them with?
Yeah, I mean, the work-life balance phrase comes up maybe as the last one here, because I was just traveling and I was waiting for someone for lunch in a restaurant, and I overheard two young women talking with what must have been their grandfather or their uncle or something like that. And I could tell they were kind of college age, and I was just standing there and overheard a little blip of their conversation. And one of them was, he asked one of them where, how's it going with job searching? And she's like, oh, well, I'm interested in these two companies, but I actually took the job with company X instead of company Y, not because they were going to pay me a little bit more money, but because they showed me that I could have work-life balance at their company. And
Okay.
I heard that, and I was like, I had to stop, and I was like, why does that feel odd to me? And I've been sitting on it, and she's 20, 22 years old, 21 years old. And I think we've been told that by the culture that life needs to fit in these nice boxes, right? And we should be able to do kind of this minimum amount of work and get paid well for it. And then we should be allowed to go out and do the rest of our life. And this compartmentalization, we've seen through YCP it leads people to feel very disconnected, to feel very disintegrated. And I was just thinking about that and thinking about the opportunity you have in your 20s that are unlike almost any other time in your life to do good work, to work hard, to discern the right environments and the right timing and the appropriate boundaries, which I'm sure you talk to your clients about all the time. That is important. We need to have appropriate boundaries. I don't think there's almost any situation in which you need to be answering midnight emails, right? With a few exceptions, right? I do also think, though, that you're uniquely positioned to work really hard before you're married and before you have kids. It's just a practical consideration. You will have more ownership of your time than probably the rest of your life. I've got 3 little kids, 3 little girls under 5 now. And I love my work and I love working hard. But I now have pulls on my time that are important that I can prioritize, like being present for dinner, putting my girls to sleep, praying with them, bath time, like all the things that happen, morning, get ready for school, drop my 4-year-old off at school. I didn't have any of those pressures in my 20s. And there's an appropriate set of boundaries that can be discussed, but I think this arbitrary work-life balance, I should get an 8 to 5, but I should also grow in my career. I should be paid more because I've just been in the workforce longer. I'm oversimplifying a little bit.
But I hear you. And even when you said it, I kind of there's a little cringe that happened also on my side. And I was like, ooh, like, why didn't that fall cleanly on my ears? Because I preach a work-life balance. I agree that it's good, it's important. But I hear exactly what you're saying, which is like, there comes points where we have to roll up our sleeves and we gotta work hard. And that being lost in this. Now, again, we can go too far in the other extreme as maybe previous generations, but it seems like maybe we've gone too far in the other direction, where we need to be encouraging people to roll up their sleeves and get the job done. Doesn't mean you become a slave to the company or a slave to the computer, but there are moments where, as you indicated, when you're young, you can work a little bit harder because A, you don't have the other pulls on your time as you indicated, and then B, also just because you're just gonna have more energy. That's the other piece.
And
So I would say I appreciate that, like encouraging people to not be afraid to give a little bit more, to work a little bit harder, and seeing how that helps with regards to your company.
yeah, and if work is good, there is
Hmm.
certainly too much work that then becomes not a good, right? We're not
Oh yeah,
called to
yeah,
work
yeah, yeah, yeah,
endlessly,
yeah.
but
Right,
we are called to commit ourselves to our work, to our teams, to our obligations, um, and
right.
it will pay bigger dividends in the long term if we invest earlier in our lives in skills
Yeah.
development and building these pieces of identity capital up that we can then use as the building blocks for the rest of our life. So I think if
Well,
work is if it is important that we work, if God called us to work and we believe that, then committing ourselves to that work early in life is really meaningful. And the last thing I'd say is if your industry, your work allows for it, consider if there are just, I mean, in the business world, you call it busy season, right? If you're an accountant, it's
hmm,
tax season, right?
yep.
For us, it's our conference season in the spring when we all kind of ramp up a little bit more. And we plan for that. Some people can do that. Some businesses aren't that cyclical, but find ways to kind of orient your mindset to say, okay, I gotta, instead of working 40 hours this week, I gotta work 50, or maybe I gotta work
Hmm.
55 or 60, whatever you're called to. Is this something where I have to stay at this revved up level for a long term? Because that will probably lead to burnout, right? But I know
Right.
I can also rev up and I can do that for whatever amount of time, right? A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever you can kind of sustain as you get to know yourself. But it's okay if you're called to rev up and then hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel here when I can take a little bit of a step back, rebalance, reconnect with
Hmm.
friends. But if you're intentional about it, it comes a lot easier than if you just sort of let it wash over you. All your
Yes.
relationships
Yeah.
disappear and you're not
Yeah.
intentional about it, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah. If you're married to an accountant, you pretty much know you're not seeing that person from January 15th to April 15th.
yeah,
You know,
there's a balance
it's
and expectations. Missed
expectations. That's
expectations
it.
are the biggest
Yeah.
reason people are unhappy. So,
Well, something that you said, just even about working hard and having the gift of your early 20s to be able to invest in starting up something and getting those hard skills and soft skills, kind of uh, learning those. I would say this. I said this to Kristen, my wife, just this past week, where I I just left a nonprofit that I was working for 6 years and stepped out on my own. I've had the practice the whole time, but the whole digital enterprise, been working with a group that was helping me with that, and I've assumed all of those things, and trying to build more of a footprint in the digital landscape. I want to be able to grow the show and be able to grow the resources that I'm offering. Well, as I've started this second business here in my mid 40s now, I would say absolutely it's been a lot more difficult because those long hours that are just required in any startup, no matter how small or how big it is, that it is putting a strain and puts demands. And my kids are in high school. I have one in college. I have my youngest is 10. They're very busy. They're very active, and it is taken away from my ability to be as present with them as I would want to be. Now, the hope is that this is a season, as we've talked about, where it starts generating enough revenue that I can bring people on board and get the help that I need to be able to grow this thing and to continue on with this trajectory. But I wholeheartedly agree with that statement that you said earlier, which is it's a lot easier to start something in your 20s than it is to start something when your kid's a little bit older.
yeah. Yeah. I think it's important, though, what you're saying that this isn't just something that happens in your 20s. This can
Right.
happen throughout life at different stages. And this gets into
Right.
conversations around communication with your spouse and your kids. And like, oh, there's
Yep.
a whole nother important episode following on here.
Yep.
But I think having clear expectations, being intentional, and also just kind of trying to keep it fun as much as you can. Like there is
Yeah.
this kind of joy that comes from doing work well, even though it's not always fun. Uh, and
Yeah,
that's
that's right.
okay. You can not be having fun at work and it still be where you're called to be.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Well, Peter, this has been a wonderful conversation. I think we've offered some really great practical advice and suggestions for young folks who are listening. If people are interested more and want to learn more about YCP, what's the best way for them to learn more about the work you're doing and also the work that YCP is doing?
Well, I hope they'll hit our website, youngcatholicprofessionals.org. We have our list of chapters there. You can see all the events that are happening across the country. We literally have hundreds of events every year that you can get started in. Come check out a networking happy hour or a speaker series. See how this community can really be a huge part of a transformation in your life if you're looking for strong connections and that understanding of why work matters and how our faith can really be a deeper part of that. So hope to meet many of the people in your audience soon and hope connect them in with YCP.
That'd be fantastic. Well, we'll have links to that in the show notes for sure. And Peter, last question, to say that right. Peter, final question I ask all my first time guests. What gives you hope?
I mean, my faith gives me hope in all of the things that are happening in the world today, the things happening in my family. I know that we are called to so much more, that we're called to sainthood, that we're called to do things well in this world, to take care of our obligations and the people around us. And it gives me hope to know that that's the end goal and the kind of relinquishing of the control that we sometimes fall into. That God's got this. He's really got this under control, and He's leading us on this path, and we see breadcrumbs. And so it gives me a lot of hope. And then just thinking about the strong spiritual friendships that I have around me gives me a lot of hope as well. Because in the midst of uncertainty, challenges, questions, I can rely on those people, and knowing that I have that network that supports me is it gives you confidence, and it's the kind of zest that we can have in life is through those relationships.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Great to have that stabilizing presence you spoke about with our faith, but then also with our friendships, and making sure that we're surrounding ourselves both with that. Again, back to the point you said earlier in terms of having a regular committed prayer life, that it's a habit, that it's built in. That habit is going to help you navigate those difficult times and the good times as well. But then being able to have invested in quality friendships so that you know you can lean into them as well during those moments. And so that's great advice, and wonderful that you shared it with us. So Peter, thank you so much for taking time from your busy schedule to join me and my listeners in today's episode. Many blessings to you and the good work that you're doing.
Thank you, Mario. This is so fun. I really appreciate the invite.